Compromised passwords are the number one cause of a data breach, and with Enzoic for Active Directory Lite, it doesn't cost anything to see what passwords in your environment are compromised. Our fast and easy password auditing tool collects a number of data points, including which passwords are weak, compromised, or reused. It then uses Enzoic's database of breached and vulnerable passwords, updated daily, to give you a snapshot of risk in your environment. It is very quick to install, and there's no configuration needed. Enzoic audits by comparing a partial hash, which means you can check your passwords without the exact password or hash ever leaving your environment. The scan is extremely fast. A domain of 500 users takes roughly 1 minute. As you can see here, I have just over 100 users, and it's completed within seconds. And this is comparing against a database with billions and billions of entries. Let's start by going through the information in the header. Now, you'll notice that for each of the data points featured in the header, they all have a separate box, and in each box there is a tab in the bottom right where if you hover your cursor over it, it will tell you what that box represents. So for example, the top left, all users, this is simply all the users found during a scan represented in a numerical value. And this will depend on if you scan your entire domain or a specific OU, container, user, or group. Administrator accounts represents the number of accounts that has administrative access in your environment, either directly or indirectly. Users with compromised passwords represents the number of users using a password that has been exposed in a data breach. And even if this wasn't from an internal breach in your company, most users tend to reuse passwords across both personal and professional accounts. So it can still be traced to them and still poses a significant risk to your environment. Accounts with no passwords can be logged into by anyone without restriction, and may have been created as a mistake during the account creation process. Weak passwords are those that are vulnerable to credential spraying attacks, and are also easily compromised if your password hashes are ever leaked from your Active Directory. Accounts sharing passwords represents the number of accounts in your environment that have an identical password to another account. This can happen if users don't change a default password or if passwords are being socialized among these users, which is a poor password practice. This value represents the number of accounts in your environment that is configured to have their password never expire. And it's not necessarily a bad thing to have passwords never expire. We provide this value so you can remediate depending on your goals and identify any inconsistencies in your environment. Stale accounts are accounts in Active Directory which have not been logged into in the last 6 months or have an expired password. Even if you have policies in place to delete user accounts upon their departure, folks such as contractors may still have accounts in your environment that may be stale accounts. And you may have noticed that as I clicked on values in the header, the relevant accounts appear in the dashboard below. So for example, when I click on users with compromised passwords, all of the users with compromised passwords appear below. Let's take a closer look at this part of the dashboard. Starting on the far left, you'll see username, and username is simply the username that you have configured for this account in Active Directory. Moving over to password strength, you'll notice that all of these accounts have compromised passwords, and this is because we are in the users with compromised passwords section of the header. If we move over to all users, you'll see that password strength can be strong, compromised, or weak. And compromised and weak correspond to the relevant header section. And exposure simply elaborates on this with a bit more information. Number of accounts with the same password tells you how many accounts have an identical password to this particular user account. So for example, when we drill down, we see that all of these accounts have one account that share the same password, but we have 6 total accounts sharing passwords. That means that these 6 accounts have another account in your environment that has the exact same password, and total, there's 6 of these accounts. If all of these accounts had the exact same password, then the number here would also be 6 for all of these accounts. If you see X under Administrator, this means that the account either directly or indirectly has administrative privileges. And password never expires corresponds to the definition of accounts with passwords set to never expire in the header. If you do have passwords set to expire in your environment, you'll see under password expire if any of those have expired yet. And account stale corresponds to the definition of stale accounts featured in the header. Also keep in mind that the number of stale accounts in the header reflects both accounts older than 6 months and also accounts that have expired passwords. On the right-hand side, you can also search by username. This is useful if you have users in your environment that might have a greater amount of privileges or might be at a higher risk that you want to monitor and ensure that they are secure. In the bottom left-hand side, there is an option to export this to a CSV, either exporting all users or exporting the current results. And this makes it easy to share this information internally. And finally, in the bottom right-hand side, there's a banner that you can click on to go to a link to download the full Enzoic for Active Directory solution. The full solution allows you to configure more granular policies, including setting up a custom dictionary of banned terms and passwords, automate the monitoring and remediation in a set and forget solution, and comply with the most stringent frameworks such as NIST 863b. The full solution is free for up to 20 users. Thank you for using Enzoic for Active Directory Lite. If you have any questions, please give us a shout.